Welcome, Portland.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. I've known Sharon for a long time. She is my hero. So it's great to be connecting with all of you. And that was amazing, Oakland folks. And we are a much smaller district, so it'll be a little different perspective and from a different climate and area, of course. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about advocacy from a community organization perspective. Lily will talk about being a community partner as a garden org, and then Brooke is a district staff person who has led the implementation of the work. First, just a little bit about Portland. We're a coastal city of about 66,000, including some islands that have schools on them. We're a very diverse community, as you can see, with 64 languages spoken. And this is just a quick snapshot, but and we're about 6,700 students or so. And I would just say there's a lot more, and Brooke may mention, but equity is an important goal for the district right now, and was certainly a guide in a lot of the work. My own background is I was a teacher, I'm a district parent, and in the last 20 years, I've been involved in advocating for green school grounds. I started the School Ground Greening Coalition, and more recently I've focused on early childhood, but I would describe my work as being a community organizer and basically a translator between the professions of teaching and design. I have some background in architectural work, and so I found myself going back and forth between these two fields with the goal of always of connecting children to nature as the end goal and helping them develop and grow and learn well as a result. Okay, so just a little bit about the groundwork, how we made progress in Portland is partly, I'm happy to say, based on some of the work that my organization did over the last 15 years or so. And I'm going to go clockwise or counterclockwise from the upper left. That's a picture of a charrette which is a community design workshop for one school ground. And the people there include city arborists, design professionals, city planners, a central office school admin, someone from Maine Audubon, and the woman with the braid directs the Portland Society for Architecture, who 3 years later became really critical to the work we did this fall. We also engaged students in the work quite a bit. They participated in planning charrettes. They participated in construction and maintenance and use of the school grounds. And we also have had a lot of other community members. So when this idea emerged and started circulating, there were already quite a few people familiar with and people who had had experience getting involved with school ground projects. And these are just 4 of the schools. We have 17 schools, and over the years we did school ground greening projects at all of them. But these are just some spaces that this fall ended up being used for teaching outside. So that sort of helped us get started as well. Another piece was that over the years we offered workshops and teaching outside, and we're very lucky to have Erica Beck-Spencer, who is from the West Coast group. I know she works with Foss and Lawrence Hall of Science, and so we're so lucky she lives in Portland, Maine, and that's another person who was helpful this fall. And I want to just talk about advocacy. How that's worked, and I wouldn't, maybe scattershot sounds a little too random, but I would say we took a lot of different approaches and they all contributed in different ways, and these are just some of them. First of all, we had a fantastic school board member who was absolutely doggedly persistent about having the words outdoor learning in the reopening plans for fall, and it was super important to have him there. Then we had a group of organizations and individuals who had already worked with the schools participate in group, and these were informal. These weren't the school department. This was just different groups who had overlapping goals to connect children in the outside. And we had meetings to talk about how might we support the schools doing this kind of work. There was a lot of sharing of stories in the news. So like the New York Times article that came out about, the Spanish flu. And then we just shared a lot, spread the word. That certainly helped. And then Maine has a lot of environmental education organizations and leadership, and also regionally, and we shared a lot of those. And excuse me, those organizations took action as well. Of course, parents and educators who cared about this were also talking. And finally, when it seemed like things could be a go, we got in touch with the Portland Society for Architecture, who really worked closely with the material from Green Schoolyards. And that was a really critical piece because they matched landscape architect or architect with all of the 17 schools, and they quickly implemented design work to help them locate outdoor classrooms. So that's just a snapshot of how we advocated to get outdoor learning underway. And I'm going to turn it over to Lily Chaleff.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Lily, and I work for a nonprofit in Portland called Cultivating Community, and we do food justice work. So this organization has existed in Portland for 18 years. We've been partnering with the schools through AmeriCorps and Food Corps for the past 12 years, and I've been in my role for 5 years. And generally, we're working food justice as a whole, both in our program and our organization. But the piece of our work that really kind of got propelled by the pandemic was, of course, the outdoor part, the school gardens, and our experience with teaching in them and essentially maintaining outdoor classrooms was very relevant. So I think something that I've been thinking about a lot as a community partner right now is finding common ground in all of our missions so we can do our most successful community work. So you can go to the next slide, Laura. So about 3 years ago, we started with a full district food security initiative called Food Fuels Learning. And this works with every aspect of the food system in the schools. And one of the subgroups is the school garden network, which I lead. And so a big piece of our goal is to get comprehensive food and education sustainably integrated into the district. And so this group has been meeting for 2 years. We're actively organizing up to 10 of the school gardens in the district. And we've been working to advocate for garden programs to move kind of from individual school PTO volunteer management into an integrated part of district learning. And specifically, we've been working around the funding piece. I think that this is very valued on a ideas level, but getting the funding and the time towards it is very difficult. And so I just kind of really want to highlight how building relationships and networks in a time of crisis can really create the community resiliency and the long-term systems change that we're looking for. So that has just been a really exciting and like silver lining of this pandemic in our community that we wanted to take a little bit of time to highlight. So you can go to the next slide. So yeah, Laura reached out in about June and I started joining those meetings she was talking about. It was a great opportunity to just be collaborating with many other partners in the district and with the school district as a whole. And so some of what we had to offer was obviously the garden is an outdoor classroom, and we have these established outdoor classrooms that we've been trying to integrate into the learning into the school district for some time. So the pictures that you see here are from a tour that Brooke and I gave to the whole school board as well as some other district officials for the final vote on how schools were going to open. So this was an opportunity for us to show them our ideas about what outdoor classrooms looked like, both closer to the school, like new spaces, and to show them these existing spaces. So we were able to offer a lot of kind of institutional knowledge about how to operate outdoor classrooms. And I had the amazing opportunity of having this platform to really show the school gardens to a larger audience of decision makers than I've been able to before. We also partnered on the district-wide teacher training that went out during the PD weeks before school opened to get teachers a little bit more comfortable with how to teach in the outdoors. So going over just guidelines and classroom management differences. And lastly, in the middle picture, you can see a curriculum bin there, which is something that my organization and Brooke have been collaborating on. They are garden curriculum bins aligned with next gen science standards for each grade. So this was a really excellent moment. You know, our first goal in the district is just to get kids and teachers outside for safety purposes. And on top of that, when people might be ready, or for whoever is ready, to be able to offer the curriculum that also helps them use the outdoor and the surroundings to teach their learning goals. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you. And so just to wrap this up, it's been a really great reciprocal relationship between us and the district and other community partners. A really exciting outcome is that the 2 food corps schools that we have in-depth partnerships did actually hire district staff members to make gardening a full-time special as a pandemic response. And now our whole school garden network is really strongly advocating and organizing around trying to make this school garden special not just a pandemic response, something that will last and expand to more schools. And we're incorporating outdoor learning and many other goals of the district into this. So it's been, as a community partner, you know, I think there's a lot of value and there's always been a lot of support for the work we do. But I think the pandemic and outdoor learning has helped gain more support, both with money and time towards school gardens. So we're glad to be able to offer that piece of it. And I'll pass it over to Brooke.
Great. Thanks, Lily. Thanks, Laura. I'm assuming my face will maybe pop up. I just see Lily's, but so I am Brooke Teller, and for the past, this is my 2nd year as the district STEM coordinator. I was a high school science teacher in the district for 11 years before I went on sabbatical to work on elementary science curriculum for the district. And last year was my first year working on that. I was part of some of the working groups that were looking at how are we going to come back to school in the fall. And those groups were meeting around the same time that Laura's groups were starting to meet, and Lily was starting to inform us on how we could be doing more outside, and that we had been doing it in our school gardens and we could expand upon that. So this is actually an image of when we were presenting to the board members that Lily spoke about. We do have some existing outdoor classrooms already on some of our campuses, but we wanted to showcase how we were going to start to use different materials for students, which I'll speak about in the upcoming slides. But I think what's really important to know is that it started with the advocacy group. The community partners started to loop in, and then the district saw how important it was going to be for us to include outdoor classroom sites in our plan as advocated for by Adam Burke, our board member. So next slide, please, Laura. So in order to do that, the district shifted my position for the start of the year to one of outdoor learning coordinator. And boy, could I use Oakland's playbook when doing this, because this is not my background. And while I have lots of fantastic advice from the community, It still was kind of a lot of unknowns to go along with that. So I look at this as a 4-phase process, and phase 1, Laura, if you could click on that, was how are we going to get ourselves outside for the start of the school year? And so one piece of that was taking the plans that came out of the work of the Portland Society of Architects. And so with each one of them working with each of our building administrators, we ended up with site plans for each building to determine how many classroom sites we would need to outfit for students to be able to use in the fall. So we have 156 outdoor learning sites across 17 buildings that we needed to gather the material for. And so the funding for that primarily came from CARES Act money. And then we also have a foundation for Portland Public Schools that folks could donate to. And then we had a lot of in-kind donations from our community. So you can see in this image here, there are buckets. We have some local distilleries that were donating to this effort. And so we ended up with donations of hundreds of buckets. We also had to buy buckets. We were outfitting the sites for 10 to 12 students. We worked with our United Way of Greater Portland, and they were able to find a carpenters union that built us 204 easels to go outside in our outdoor classrooms, which we had whiteboards outfitted for teachers. And then we also needed to supply the students with learning kits because, of course, in these times we shouldn't be sharing materials. So we were able to get drawstring backpacks. And I think, Laura, that's in the next picture maybe. Drawstring backpacks, clipboards, notebooks, and pens for each of the students that would be returning to school. And we have a hybrid. So we have they're in person one day and then out one day, and that repeats, with Wednesday being a day that no one's in the building. I know it said in the beginning we have 6,750 students. Approximately 1,000 of our students opted for full remote academy. We set up a whole separate school where those students aren't coming at all. So my numbers for outfitting these classrooms were for about 5,000 students. We recognized that a lot of our teachers were not familiar with teaching outdoors and needed to know what the tips, tricks, and strategies might be for that. And so this professional development video, Outdoor Learning 101, includes advice from Lily through her garden work, and from Erica Beck Spencer, who we heard about, from teaching outside. We have some teachers from the district speaking about how to do different content outside, not just science, but also your English class or social studies. And then just going through the different materials that teachers would have for the outdoor learning. I think, and one of the other really important pieces that I just want to mention, when I spoke with our district administrators and agreed to take on this position, I said that for me, it was really important that this was not just a pandemic response, but it is a look to the future and how we can do outdoor learning in our district beyond the coronavirus. And so with that, I also explained that we needed to have a person in each building that would be able to oversee the work for their school. So we actually created stipended building liaison positions. And so those people, one person per building, are getting paid a stipend in order to help with the work. So phase 2 is then about shade structures that we wanted to get. I learned a lot about fire codes and building codes during this process that I did not know before. And so we actually, through the advice of one of the architects that worked with one of our schools, found Transform It, which is a local company to us in Portland, Maine. And they do a lot of, if you think about trade shows and things like that, they do a lot of very groovy architectural fabric sculptures for those, but they also create these architectural shades for outside. They are not waterproof. They will stop a drizzle, but nothing more than that. And they cannot handle a snow load. So for us here in Maine, they will be coming down soon, but they do provide a shelter from the sun, and they allow us to get 10 to 12 students underneath them. The cost for 33 sunshades was approximately $80,000. You can see we put some together here. We put 2 together so that they could do a circle. This school wanted to be able to circle up 14 students under the shades. And we have found that while they look really groovy, they also look a lot like a trampoline. And so I think the last picture, we have found that some students have climbed on them in off school hours. And so that is something that we're trying to address, because these shades cannot take that kind of load for very long. And so we do have almost all 33 of those structures up. They will, of course, be coming down soon, and then they'll go back up again in spring. All of the placement points for the attachments do not have to come down during the winter, so it'll make it much easier to get them up in the spring and get going. So then there's phase 3. We do live in Maine, which does get cold. And so we did need to start gathering gear for students that aren't able to access it on our own. We talked about equity being a really important piece of this. And so making sure that we can access hats and gloves for all of our students was really important. We have on order many yards of fleece to create lap blankets for the students. And also I just put in an order for snow pants for our elementary students that are unable to provide their own snow pants, so that we can start to look at being outside longer. And that leads to phase 4, which is professional development for our teachers to be able to encourage them to stay outside more. So Lily talked about the next generation science standard garden bins that we created. That's K through 5th grade, 3 lessons per grade, a grab and go. We're using CARES Act money to build out the rest of those bins so that all of the supplies will be there for the teachers. We are accessing different professionals in the area and consultants, one in particular, Ann Stiers from Juniper Hills School. They are outdoors 100% of the time, and she has a lot of advice to give us, so we'll be working with her. I've written for a few grants to get funding so that teachers can access Maine Audubon's curriculum that they've been developing. I've also, because I'm the STEM coordinator, have put out science curriculum in the form of a Padlet. So there's one on fall leaves, there's one on migration. And we recognize that this is a lift for some teachers, and especially a lift when it's really cold outside too. And so our hope is that we can just keep giving folks tools and keep encouraging them. And it's just for me to look back and say, wow, we got 156 outdoor sites. Over 50% of our teachers report using being outside. And when you go from 0% to 50%, I'm pretty proud of that. And I think that it's only going to get better from here. So I think I'd like to stress that community advocates and partners are essential to this work. And then having a supportive district administration that is ready to jump in and take a risk, frankly, because it's not something we had done on such a broad, such a big scale before. So I appreciate everyone being here and listening to us talk about what we've been up to in Portland, Maine.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I mean, Brooke, Laura, Lily, that was incredible to see the work that you're doing in Portland, Maine, and to just get the nitty gritty details of the phases and all that stuff. And I know there's probably just time for 1 or 2 questions, but one of the questions that came up in the chat box, there was many that were answered, but one that I didn't see answered was, what are you guys doing with PE, and how does that interfere with the outdoor classroom work that you're doing, if at all?
PE, they're outside the whole time, and it doesn't impact the outdoor spaces at all. None of the outdoor spaces are like on a basketball court or in the middle of a field, so they can have concurrent classes, and that doesn't impact PE. I also know most of our art teachers at the elementary level are outside for most of their classes.
Okay, great. It's fantastic. Any other quick questions that people have that we could address here? Well, somebody else mentioned special ed. What about special ed?
So we have a number of different special ed programs in the district, and they also have their own outdoor spaces for some of those, because they're much smaller groups. We were able to find some of the like 10 by 20 pop-up canopies that are also flame retardant and meet all of the different fire codes. And so they too have outdoor spaces that they're able to utilize as well.
Great. Awesome. Fantastic. Well, incredible presentations today. Thank you both Oakland and Portland for sharing everything. Please follow up, folks, with the presenters if you have follow-up questions. Many people put their email in the chat box, but we really thank you for being here today. Our hope is next time we'll get some chance to do the breakout so that you can connect with people around the country. But we wish you all well as you head off into the rest of your week, and we'll be following up very soon with some information about our next session. So thank you all.
Thank you all. Look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much, all the presenters. It was fabulous.